Am I the asshole for not coming out to my coworker?
I never realized how exhausting it is to constantly calculate how much of yourself is safe to reveal to other people, especially in Texas, especially as a teacher, and especially when the people around you seem kind and friendly on the surface, but you're never completely sure whether that kindness has conditions attached to it. I'm 25, I teach middle school, and I've been with my girlfriend for a little over 2 years now. And before anyone asks, no, I'm not deep in the closet or secretly living some double life. My friends know, my family mostly knows, a handful of coworkers know. I post pictures sometimes, though not constantly. I don't lie about who I am in most situations, but I also don't walk into work announcing, hi everyone, I'm gay. Partly because I don't think straight people have to do that, so why should I? And partly because teaching in Texas can be complicated. People online love pretending acceptance is universal now, but that really depends on where you live and who you're surrounded by. In some places, being openly queer barely registers anymore. In others, people smile at your face and quietly start treating you differently the second they find out. As a teacher, that risk feels even bigger because parents talk, co-workers talk, administrators talk, and once people decide they're uncomfortable with you, it can affect everything from workplace dynamics to professional opportunities. So over time, I developed this habit of quietly assessing people before deciding how much of myself to share. Some people immediately feel safe, others don't. And honestly, I've learned to trust my instincts. At my current school, there's another teacher on my team named Molly. Molly is genuinely sweet. That's what makes this whole thing feel complicated. She's warm, friendly, helpful, the kind of person who always remembers birthdays and leaves little candy bowls in her classroom for students. If somebody's having a bad day, she notices immediately, but she's also extremely religious, like openly religious in a very traditional way. Bible verses in emails sometimes, church stories constantly, conversations about biblical values, nothing hateful exactly, at least not openly. But enough little comments over time that I quietly decided she probably wasn't someone I wanted to discuss my sexuality with. And honestly, queer people become very good at noticing subtle signs. Straight people sometimes think prejudice only counts if someone directly screams slurs at you, but usually it's much quieter than that. It's the tiny comments, the discomfort, the love the sinner, hate the sin energy, the way someone suddenly becomes awkward after learning something about you. I've experienced enough of that to know when my nervous system starts waving warning flags. So while Molly and I became friendly at work, I kept certain parts of my life vague around her. Not fake, just vague. If she asked what I did over the weekend, I'd say, oh, I hung out with friends. If my girlfriend and I went somewhere nice, I might say, I went on a trip with someone. I know some people would probably call that dishonest. But honestly, when you grow up queer in places where acceptance feels conditional, vague answers become second nature. It's survival instinct more than deception. And for the past 2 years, it never caused any problems. Until now, school just let out for summer break recently, so for the last couple weeks, everybody's been nonstop talking about summer plans. Teachers are basically children the last week before summer. Nobody's mentally present anymore. People are counting days, cleaning classrooms, gossiping in hallways, planning vacations. And honestly, I was excited too, because my girlfriend and I have been planning a trip to Edinburgh for months. It's our first really big international trip together. We've both been saving for it forever. I've literally had Pinterest boards for this trip since winter. So naturally, when a few coworkers I'm closer to asked about my summer plans, I mentioned I was going with my girlfriend, not dramatically. Not like some coming out announcement, just casually, because with them I feel safe. Then one afternoon, Molly asked me what I was doing this summer. I told her I was going to Edinburgh. She got excited immediately and started asking questions. Then she asked, are you going with anyone? And I paused for maybe half a second before saying, yeah, I'm going with a friend. The second the word left my mouth, I already felt a little guilty. Because technically, it wasn't true. But also, technically, my girlfriend is my friend, which I know sounds like a ridiculous loophole, but honestly, queer people joke about this kind of thing constantly because we've all done it at some point. And the reason I answered that way wasn't because I wanted to deceive Molly specifically. It was because I didn't want to come out to her, at least not then. Maybe not ever, and I genuinely believe that should have been my choice. The conversation moved on immediately afterward. No drama, no suspicion, no issue. At least I thought so. Apparently, later that same day, another coworker who knows about my relationship mentioned casually to Molly that I was going to Edinburgh with my girlfriend. Not maliciously, not gossiping, just in a normal conversational way, like, oh my god, that sounds so fun. And suddenly my carefully maintained separation between safe coworkers and uncertain coworkers completely collapsed without my consent. I didn't even realize it happened until today. I woke up this morning to a massive text from Molly, and when I say massive, I mean massive, like several long paragraphs. At first, I honestly panicked because I thought maybe something terrible had happened at school, but then I started reading. The message basically said she felt deeply hurt that I didn't trust her enough to tell her the truth about my relationship. She specifically mentioned feeling confused that I didn't feel safe sharing that part of my life with her. And honestly, that word hit me immediately, safe. Because suddenly the exact thing I'd quietly been worried about for 2 years was now the center of the conversation. The message wasn't angry exactly, more emotional, like genuinely wounded. She said she thought we were friends and didn't understand why I would lie to her. And now I genuinely don't know how to feel, because on one hand, I understand why she's hurt. If you think you're becoming close to someone and later realize they intentionally withheld personal information, I can understand why that stings emotionally, especially because from her perspective, maybe this wasn't even about sexuality. Maybe to her it was simply, why didn't you trust me? And honestly, that's the part making me question myself now, because maybe I made assumptions about her unfairly. Maybe I projected past experiences onto someone who never actually gave me a concrete reason to distrust her. But at the same time, queer people don't usually wait for concrete proof anymore. That's kind of the whole point. By the time someone openly says something hateful, it's often too late. The discomfort already exists. The relationship already changes. And honestly, the fact that Molly is hurt, I didn't feel safe telling her, almost proves why queer people stay cautious in the first place, because suddenly my emotional safety became secondary to her hurt feelings. Nobody asks straight people to disclose their sexuality to coworkers for honesty reasons. Straight people casually mention spouses and partners without calculating risk first. I do, every single time. And I don't think non-queer people fully understand how exhausting that calculation becomes, especially professionally, especially in education. I started replaying every interaction Molly and I have had over the last 2 years, trying to figure out whether I unfairly judged her, and honestly, I still don't know. There were little moments that made me cautious, comments about marriage, conversations about church teachings, certain political opinions. Nothing directly hostile, but enough for my brain to quietly go, maybe not. And when you've spent your whole life navigating environments where acceptance feels uncertain, maybe not is often enough to keep yourself guarded. What complicates everything is that Molly genuinely has always been kind to me. She's brought me coffee before, helped cover classes, checked on me when I looked stressed. And now I feel weirdly guilty, like I betrayed someone who considered me a friend. At the same time, though, I keep coming back to one thought. Being kind does not automatically make someone safe for vulnerable information. Those are not always the same thing. Some people are lovely coworkers and still deeply uncomfortable with queer people once things become personal. And honestly, maybe the strongest reason I kept things vague around Molly is because I didn't want to risk changing the dynamic we already had. Because right now she likes me. Right now things are easy, but I've had enough experiences in life to know how quickly that can shift. Suddenly people become distant, awkward, overly polite, overcompensating, or worse, they start viewing your entire identity through the lens of your sexuality. I didn't want that, especially not at work. Teaching already drains enough emotional energy without adding identity politics into the mix. I showed the text to a few close friends, most of whom are queer. every single one immediately said the same thing. You never owe anyone coming out. And honestly, logically, I agree with them. No queer person is obligated to disclose personal information just to make straight people comfortable, especially in environments where the consequences are unpredictable, but emotionally things feel messier now. Because Molly wasn't cruel, she was hurt. And somehow hurt is harder to deal with than anger. If she'd sent some hateful rant, I probably would have immediately felt validated in my instincts. Instead, she basically sent, "I thought we were friends, and I'm sad you didn't trust me," which makes me feel awful. Part of me wonders if I should have just told her casually, months ago, and trusted her to handle it well. Maybe I underestimated her. Maybe my fear made me unfair. But another part of me thinks straight people often underestimate how deeply queer people learn to protect themselves. Because every queer person has a story about the nice person who suddenly wasn't so nice anymore after finding out. Sometimes it's dramatic, sometimes it's subtle. But once you experience enough of those moments, caution becomes automatic. And honestly, I don't think self-protection should require guilt. One thing that really bothered me in Molly's message was how much emphasis she placed on the lie. Because yes, technically I lied, sort of, but also I think there's a huge difference between malicious deception and controlled disclosure. I wasn't scamming her, I wasn't manipulating her, I simply chose not to share personal information I wasn't comfortable sharing. And honestly, straight people do this constantly too. People avoid discussing marriages, finances, politics, health issues, religion, family drama, all kinds of personal things at work. But somehow sexuality becomes uniquely loaded because people interpret withholding it as personal rejection. I think that's part of what's happening here. Molly seems less upset that I'm gay and more upset that I didn't trust her specifically enough to tell her. And honestly, I understand why that hurts. But trust isn't something people are automatically owed, it's built slowly. And sometimes people never fully feel safe enough. That's life. I also think there's something emotionally complicated about being the first queer person someone feels close to, because suddenly your existence forces them to reconcile their beliefs with a real human relationship. And honestly, I didn't want to become somebody's moral growth journey at work. I just wanted peace. That's really the core of all this: peace, predictability, professional safety, the ability to do my job without constantly wondering how people truly see me. Now that this happened, I honestly feel anxious about going back after summer. Not because I think Molly will become hateful, I actually don't think she will, but because now there's tension where there wasn't before. Now there's emotional weight attached to something I deliberately tried to keep simple and private. And ironically, the entire situation kind of reinforces why queer people stay cautious in the first place, because even in the best case scenario, disclosure changes things. It always changes things, maybe only slightly, maybe temporarily, but it changes things. And honestly, I'm tired of calculating, tired of wondering, tired of trying to balance honesty, safety, professionalism, and emotional management all at once. Sometimes I envy straight people so much for the sheer simplicity of existing openly without thinking about it. They don't have to mentally assess every new person for risk. They don't have to wonder whether mentioning a partner will shift how coworkers treat them. They don't have to decide whether saying girlfriend is worth possible consequences. I do, all the time. And I think that's why this whole situation upset me more than I expected, because now I'm sitting here wondering whether protecting myself somehow made me a bad friend. And honestly, I still don't know the answer.